But we begin tonight with Liz Cheney, voted out of office in resounding fashion, losing the Wyoming Republican primary by almost 30 percentage points, an outcome that was expected, but questions still linger about her political future. As she said, quote, "Now the real work begins," and exited the stage from her concession speech to Tom Petty's "I Won't Back Down." NewsNation does have team coverage monitoring every angle of the story, including rumors about a possible Cheney presidential campaign in 2024. So let's start with NewsNation correspondent Kellie Meyer live in Washington.
Hey, Nichole. Well, like you said, Congresswoman Liz Cheney may be closing out one chapter, but hinting that the book on her political career is far from finished, saying she's, quote, thinking about a 2024 presidential run and will decide in the coming months. In the meantime, she's keeping the focus on former President Donald Trump. And in her concession speech, Cheney told supporters her work was far from over. Just hours later, she launched a PAC called The Great Task, which was the name of her final ad before Election Day. It's the main task is to stop Trump from ever stepping back into the Oval Office. Here's a part from her concession speech last night.
2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again. The path was clear. But it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. That was a path I could not and would not take.
Now, Trump and his team are celebrating Cheney's loss, calling the results a complete rebuke of the January 6th committee. Trump saying Cheney can now finally, quote, disappear into the depths of political oblivion. And Cheney will be back on Capitol Hill to finish out the remainder of her term here, returning in a few weeks and helping lead the next round of January 6th hearings as she weighs her next political steps. Nichole?
All right, Kellie, thank you for that. And we'll get right back to you, so don't go anywhere. Let's bring in now senior national correspondent Brian Entin to talk more with us about Cheney and the impact on the race for the White House. So, of course, we still need to get through the midterms. But after Cheney's loss last night, and it was a big one, what does that mean for Trump's other critics, especially if they are possibly considering a presidential run? Brian, we'll start with you.
Well, Nichole, I think if you asked former President Trump that, he would say, look, this is a warning. Don't mess with me or you're going to end up the way Cheney did, a big loser. We saw that big loss last night. But you also have to remember the flip side of that. Wyoming, where this happened, it's a unique state. It's a small state. There's a lot of Trump supporters there. And also, Cheney had the very, very high-profile position of being the head of the January 6th Commission. So there's some interesting elements there that are unique to that specific race in Wyoming. But again, you have to imagine a lot of the Republicans out there are thinking to themselves, ooh, I don't know that I want to get myself in the same situation that Cheney was in.
Yeah, and Kellie, let's toss it over to you now. I mean, should critics of Trump now be concerned?
Well, I think we look at, those 10 Republicans that voted to impeach the president. They're either retiring or lost their race. So the lesson there is to pack your bags. For Liz Cheney, the message from Capitol Hill to the campaign trail was to dispel that the 2020 election was stolen. But that message didn't really resonate with voters. And we're seeing that across the country, that those Trump-backed candidates that stand by his claims that the election was rigged are moving forward in their races. But I will say that for candidates like Brian Kemp in Georgia, he was not endorsed by the former president, and he is moving ahead in his race. But again, those Trump-backed candidates like Kari Lake in Arizona doing well. So I think we set out here trying to find in these primary races the Trump test each and every Tuesday. And I think it's safe to say that Trump still has this hold on the GOP.
Yeah, it certainly does appear that way. Okay, this is another question for both of you. There are a number of Republicans, of course, that like the idea of having a competitive 2024 field, but others, are steering clear. They're going ahead and making way for Trump. So what is the GOP trying to prove at this point? Is there, I guess, this fear of Trump? Kellie?
Well, I look back to the Virginia governor's race that we were covering months ago. We saw Glenn Youngkin out there really not calling Trump in to campaign with him, not really messaging or using him in his messaging. So trying to distinguish himself as his own candidate, and he could be a potential 2024 candidate there. So I think you see others like him trying to distinguish themselves while at the same time trying not to upset the former president.
Oh, and Brian, I want to throw it over to you now. I mean, is there this fear of Trump, among the GOP party?
I think there is. I think a lot of them are scared of Trump. And Kellie brought up Brian Kemp in Georgia. That was a good example. They had their drama during the 2020 election, and he's not endorsed by Trump, and he's doing well in Georgia. But he's not really calling out Trump. He tries not to talk about Trump. If he's asked about issues during the election and he's asked about Trump, he sort of deflects. Even he knows he's trying to steer clear right now.
All right, and so let's flip to the other side of the aisle. Kellie, when we look at the Democrats, what kind of ammo, I guess, for lack of a better word, is expected as we get closer to the midterms and then beyond out to 2024?
Yeah, and I think they're looking a lot at these last few weeks at some of their legislative wins, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, which the president signed yesterday. So we're seeing the president hitting the road, trying to tout his achievements, and not only him, but sending out his cabinet and members of Congress to try to share this message with voters, but only they can decide if that's enough.
All right. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.